Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for having us here to present. My name is Richard Mugford, and I am the Senior Manager of the Community Information Exchange with Distress Center Calgary. And I'm co-presenting with my colleague Sam Elliott, the Director of Data and Analytics with the Calgary Homeless Foundation. So today we wanted to talk a bit about building a community information exchange and how we've leveraged collaborations in doing so and getting to where we've got. We thought the objective today is really to unpack collaborations in terms of a community information exchange. We wanted to do this through an approach of sort of the W5, the who, what, where, when, why, how we've gone about leveraging collaborations here. And we thought it'd be really interesting, and that's why Sam's been so gracious to present, is to provide our perspective as the lead organization for the Community Information Exchange, as well as our partners' perspective as we're going through these different components and addressing these different questions. So really, to start is the who and who we are. And as I said, I'm with Distress Center, and our core business is a 211 call center as well as crisis lines. Outside of that, we also offer professional counseling services. We operate the coordinated entry program, which is part of our coordinated access for entering into the homeless serving system of care. And actually in tomorrow's presentation, we'll be learning a bit about our co-location project with 211 and 911 in terms of diverting calls of a mental health nature that do not require police response. So core service of INR, but we're also involved in a number of other services. So we're generalists, but there are some specializations that we do provide. The next piece, I'll pass it over to Sam to talk a bit about the Homeless Foundation.
Yeah, so you might be asking yourself, why is the Calgary Homeless Foundation presenting at this conference and on this talk? And it's sort of a bit of a background about ourselves. So we're a funder of program serving those experiencing homelessness here in Calgary. So that ranges from supportive housing programs to encampment outreach to shelter diversion and a whole diverse portfolio of programs. But on top of that, we actually run the homeless management information system here in Calgary and a data warehouse on top of that. So that is a system of records. I think your EMRs of the world, except for aimed at those experiencing homelessness. And we provide that to both all of our funded programs as well as unfunded programs. And many shelter in our city uses our software. In addition to that, we have a data warehouse running on top of that compiles all this data in real time to really create that action and day-to-day decision-making that data can provide. That's sort of at that macro perspective, but at that micro perspective, and where it ties into this community information exchange, is we also run the placement committees that triage individuals into those supportive housing programs. And our incentives there are to have the most accurate information so we can put triage that individual into the correct programs and make an efficient process. So that's why I'm here today and joining Richard on this call.
Thanks. And the Homeless Foundation has been a day one partner with the Distress Center in undergoing this community information exchange initiative. So I'm assuming that there's a number of folks on the call who are familiar with the Community Information Exchange and a number of folks who are not so familiar with the Community Information Exchange. So I'm going to try and condense what I've been talking about for the last 2.5 years into a quick CIE primer. So really, what's the best way to put it? Community Information Exchange is really an ode to collaboration. Like, how can we truly collaborate between network partners as well as system partners? So when we think about individuals who require complex and urgent care, they're accessing health services, they might be interacting with the justice system, they may be interacting with food banks and nonprofit agencies. And in the core, this is great. A lot of programs, a lot of services are supporting individuals, but they're often siloed. So the Community Information Exchange, which was developed in San Diego by 211 San Diego, I think around 2015, really starts imagining a world where we can provide true collaboration and answering some questions. Like, what kind of service could we provide if we understood an individual's longitudinal journey within systems as they pop into agencies, interact with other systems, rather than at the programmatic level in that time period? What if we understood their complete journey over a longer period of time? And so a community information exchange creates a longitudinal record. How do we talk about individuals and their needs when we cross into different services? How are doctors speaking about service seekers versus justice system versus us in the nonprofit world? And what if we were able to level the playing field by using a shared language and understanding individuals' needs? And that's where the community information exchange brings in the social determinants of health. Why are information and referral organizations or 211s leading a lot of the CIE work in North America? Well, what if we can provide access to a resource database so people can understand referral pathways? What if we really understood the results of those referrals and created either bi-directional or closed loop referrals so case managers at programs can understand if the individual that they made that referral to can attend? So we leverage that. And last piece is how do we, well, there's two last pieces, sorry. How do we collaborate together with our systems? And this is where we bring in interoperable technology, allowing our systems to speak to each other and share that data between each other. And finally, and probably most importantly, how do we do this in a manner that respects the privacy of individuals' personal information, understands the different legislations that we're sharing information in, and does it so in a consent-driven manner? And this is the where we present the information sharing framework and addressing different legislations to do so. So I could go on about the Community Information Exchange and probably take up 2 presentations time, but I'm going to leave it there. And wait, if you have questions about the Community Information Exchange at the end, I'd be more than happy to answer those questions. So in saying all that about who we are and a little bit of information about the Community Information Exchange, really, why did Distress Center get into this? Why did we decide that participating in a collaboration at this type of project makes sense in Calgary at the time when we made this decision? And a number of these factors were coming into play pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID, that Distress Center started noticing, and I think we're being noticed in multiple communities across North America. The first piece, so as the Community Information Exchange was being developed in San Diego, and San Diego started presenting this idea throughout in symposiums like this and the Inform USA conference, we were also at that time meeting with various organizations through the City of Calgary Mental Health and Addiction Strategy. So what had been noticed in community was that we were seeing this mental health crisis and noticing that there were a number of key concerns and issues that weren't being addressed by the status quo system. So, and lo and behold, we at Distress Center ended up on a working group that was looking at pathways into the mental health system of care. Knowing that and having the Community Information Exchange information behind us, we're realizing that a number of partner agencies were also talking about these issues. We don't know what's going on from agency to agency. We don't know how to get people directed to the appropriate resource at the appropriate time. So that was really fortuitous that this was coming up, that there was a community convener outside of Distress Center that was looking at similar issues that were being addressed through a Community Information Exchange. So that's sort of the external community-based piece that led us to believe that this was a great idea to move forward with. Internally, during the pandemic, whether it was on our crisis lines or even with our INR 211 calls, we were realizing that the calls were increasing significantly in length, and that increase was due to the complexity of the calls. Those calls were also being funneled to a reduced amount of services, which were typically are indicative of our housing and mental health crisis that were coming, some that started pre-pandemic, and the housing crisis that really started to take off post-pandemic. And through Community Distress Center, going to symposiums and conferences, is learning about, absorbing this movement in the IRNR community, that there is an opportunity to do more than and break the status quo. So these were some of the drivers that led us to implementing or deciding to go forward with this community information exchange. But we had to now vet this with our community partners, and how are we going to bring a problem to the community to see if they're on board, if they're seeing the same things that we are. So we provided this statement, and it's in the status quo. People who are referred to social services for complex and urgent care are not receiving the best support possible. And we brought that to our community partners that we were meeting at around the mental health and addiction strategy, and really got to see if there was buy-in. So bringing that question really was something that community members could align with. And I want to pass it over to Sam to sort of speak about the why the Homeless Foundation thought it was also appropriate to be joining this collaboration.
Thanks, Richard. So as we talked about earlier, one of the processes that CHF runs is triaging individuals into relevant supportive housing programs. We have a lot of data on folks. So we have, client-centered data in which the individuals themselves have provided assessment data. And we also have this longitudinal journey within our own sector. And so if you look at that the chart above, it's actually looking at an example of a journey through our sector where an individual has been in shelter, they've had received outreach services. They've even been in our COVID isolation site back there in 2022. And you can see those ongoing episodes there on our created access assessments. They're looking to get into supportive housing. And this looks great. It looks like a lot of information to explain, and we can look into the assessments and those detailed questionnaires that this person interacted throughout our system. But if we actually go and look a bit more in detail, we can see that there's gaps here. So these are places where the individual was on our CAA list, but not actually interacting with shelter. They weren't interacting with outreach. We simply in our data do not understand or know where this individual was interacting. And maybe they were in the health system or the justice, or maybe they're in detox or treatment. These are types of data points that could really inform which supportive housing is most relevant to this individual, and we can really triage them into the best type of programming that in the current state we do not have. So that's one challenge we have, just that lack of data on the other programs and sector usage. And the next part, and this is a very tangible on the ground example, is that it takes on average from being a referral being accepted to an individual being into their housing unit 2 weeks. That is 2 weeks where an individual is experiencing 14 more days of homelessness, being in our shelter or outreach, living on the streets. And this is just simply based around the fact that housing programs may not know where those individuals are at. They could be in a public sector, or they could be even next door. And that information is struggling to be communicated, and we're struggling to get those individuals into their available housing unit within the appropriate amount of time. And so that's really two of the examples where our interest lied in this project, was these two very tangible, very known gaps that could really help inform and better serve the individuals in our city.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. So with partners like the Homeless Foundation and our other partners, we're becoming these tangible reasons why partnering on the community information exchange build was really starting to make sense. So how are we going to maintain this community, leverage our partnerships, and really get into the nuts and bolts of building a community information exchange was the next question that we had to ask. So we started, and I love asking questions, but we started with a how might we statement. And a how might we, for those of you who are unfamiliar with that, is a really intentional way of addressing a problem within community and soliciting buy-in. And it's the first three words of the how might we that are important. And the how is really understanding that the community information exchange wasn't built yet, and it needed to be built in context to the Calgary community and Calgary community needs. Distress Center didn't have the solution for that. This is where we needed to be a community and figure that out. So we weren't starting with a solution and trying to get validation. It was how. Might invites the opportunity to brainstorm and potentially fail, right? Those solutions are solid in their first iteration. So this is really a reflective part of the question. And we was bringing in community members. So we galvanized around this, how might we co-design and implement an ecosystem of multidisciplinary service providers committed and equipped to provide holistic, coordinated, person-centered care in Calgary area. And we used a lot of buzzwords, but in our literature and in our documentation, we really strive to also hone down in what we meant by each of those words that you see in colors there. So that's where we started. To build it, we needed a recipe, and the recipe that worked for us here in Calgary was recognition. So once again, the community information exchange, the need for a community information exchange was recognized in the City of Calgary's mental health and addiction strategy, well before we even had funding to move forward with it. That mental health and addiction strategy was the place where we secured our collaborators. And there was a very healthy group of collaborating partners right there that were all sitting at that table for the mental health and addiction strategy. As a matter of fact, they all helped write the proposal for the grant that we received. And when we didn't receive the funding the first time, they were the ones who came back to Distress Center and said, you need to rewrite this grant and apply for it again when the second round came out. So strong recognition, strong collaboration. We also required strong support, and we were fortunate enough to receive funding from the government of Alberta through the Civil Society Fund, as well as some supplemental funding on the first batch from the United Way of Calgary and area. So that was our recipe to move forward. We were able to use the support to put this project on the front of desk for an individual to help coordinate a collaboration that was really interested in leveraging the excitement from the City of Calgary's mental health and addiction strategy. And then we structured the build. Those collaborative partners became our steering committee. And that steering committee oversaw a task force. And these task force were members of community and lead agency and community partners. And we were trying to unpack all the key components or the core components to the community information exchange. And we did this through what we call task force. We also were able to leverage some projects that were going on in community to test some of the components of a community information exchange. So this is how our initial structure for the build was conceived. And most importantly, we took a person-centered approach. And I think this was a piece where we really were able to get understanding from those folks who agreed that there was a problem with the status quo and we needed to change, but really needed to wrap their heads around this a tangible story to support what the heck this community information exchange was. So we created the story of Chris, and Chris's journey was that of an individual who was unhoused and unsheltered. And we walked Chris through different neighborhoods in Calgary over a cold period of time in the month of January, and understood Chris's interactions with systems like the justice system, police services, mental health services, housing services, health services, Tim Hortons, and really understood that we're really able to understand how Chris's journey and Chris's story happened today, and start to imagine what a community information exchange might do to support Chris's story. So I think this was a really key piece in galvanizing community around the CIE. Now I'm going to pass it over to Sam.
Yeah, one of the things that's maybe of interest is how do you actually get your partners on board here, and sort of what is the value to them? And there's been a few main pieces that would provide value for us. The first is alignment that enables us to plan. So having all the different stakeholders in the room together talking about what these next steps are looking like and timelines allows us to actually plan into our work cycles when we're going to action on this item. It's as much as when the CIE is built out, a lot of it will be on the distress center side. Those integrations still need to be ready to go. And this platform is only as valuable as the integrations it has. And so this allows being a partner as part of all the stages and selections allows us to plan that in our work cycles. The next is we're able to actually contribute our thoughts around what this design of the system will look like that supports our efforts. So what do we actually need out of this system that's going to provide us the same or greater value than we are providing into it by sharing our data? And the last is it helps contribute to that collaborative approach across our city. So in the rooms that we have folks from our home serving sector. We have folks from Alberta Health Services. We have folks from the city of Calgary. We've had a variety of different sectors all there at the table talking around how we can solve this information exchange challenge. And it really is bringing a lot of the right people in the room together and a lot of exposure to those different perspectives and what we need to do to be in line with them.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. So after all this conversation about collaboration and getting buy-in and this I guess should be the slide of me showing you where the information exchange is. Well, we don't have it yet. So where we've gotten to over this period of time are two really key areas, and it's really important to highlight this. And I think outside of a community information exchange, when you're looking at collaborating and you're really looking at exchanging individual information, a lot of time is going to be taken on how are you going to share information in a means that is compliant and ethical. And so we started right off the beginning understanding that the information sharing framework that we devise is going to be a key core document in moving us forward, especially if we want to interact with systems, because now we're talking about a number of different privacy legislations. So we have built out the information sharing framework, and we leveraged an organization, a pan-Canadian organization called the Converge Mental Health Coalition, who is also working on a similar type of issue in the mental health space about how can we share patient data, individual information in that manner. That information sharing framework, as great as a document, also needs to be vetted, re-vetted, privacy impact assessed, and gone through lawyers. So we're now bringing in all the consultants in to support some of the risk aversions we're seeing in community and with our sector partners and our system partners. Also, we wanted to drive, a community information exchange is about a transformative approach to the way we do work. So we did not want the technology to leverage to dictate how we are planning to work. We wanted to really understand how we are planning to work and then pick a technology. But at some point, you need to pick a technology. And this was an area that we found a lot of risk aversion in our community. A number of players have gone, whether it was just software as a service or to a developed approach with procuring technology, have had a lot more failures than success, if you will, in this sphere. So we went through a very long process to procure technology that involved multiple community consultations, a very long RFP process, and hopefully by the end of I keep saying this week or next week, we hope to be announcing our vendor as we sign off on the contract. So those are the two key pieces, but those are the two key pieces where our collaboration really mattered and our relationships really mattered. Also, with our partners, we are now working on stakeholder engagement. So we started this process and we tried to limit the amount of partners involved in the community information exchange development. This was against the grain of how other CIEs have been built in the United States and across. But we started with that a little bit of fear of this being another project that gets shelved and not wanting to expose all community to that work. So we started very small, and as this momentum keeps growing and growing and growing, we're trying to figure out how to bring in the right stakeholders at the right time with the right product moving forward. Also, that piece of being person-centered has been very important to us, and we have developed Chris's journey, which is one journey that does not explain all the benefits that we can realize with this CIE product. So we're starting to explore new journeys, whether the individual is in the homeless surveying system or not. What are these journeys? What are these experiences within the Calgary context that matter? And as we all know, technology and a project like this comes at a cost. So we're really revving up the machines and how to collaboratively do we look at sustaining this model for all our agencies. So that's where we're at from our perspective. Where are you at, Sam?
Thanks, Richard. So the first one is, where as we work on our own systems, we're thinking how is this going to connect to that CIA? What are those connection points? We're trying to build out more and more of those automations around data connection points, and this is going to be one of them. So then we can roadmap that into our development. Our tools aren't stagnant either, and as one thing, especially when you're bringing together folks from such various different sectors, none of the tools are going to be stagnant along this process, and they are evolving since we even started 2 years ago. And so we're thinking as we continue to do those evolutions and revolutions of our products, what does that look like? And how is that going to match the CIE? And how we're going to leverage the CIE within them? And finally, if you are an information holder in one of our sectors, you can get a lot of requests around information sharing. We got a lot of requests around being on projects and task forces. And by being part of the CIE, it really enables us to concentrate on just solely one of these projects instead of joining all of them. And we can direct external requests in these pieces towards that CIE and say, let's work it through this channel versus trying to create a million channels to a million different audiences.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. Sharing our learnings here, I want to stress this. A CIE, Community Information Exchange, might be the right answer for communities across the land. But our learnings transcend that. And this is about collaboration and how to really, what we're taking and how to enable a true, authentic collaboration with partners and community around whatever issue, user journey it may be. Really, we have to, if we're thinking of systems change, we really need to think community first, right? This, and to borrow from San Diego language, if a CIE is about any one program or any one agency, then it's not a CIE. That holds really true. This, don't create solutions and then look for the problem. So really approaching community, developing those authentic relationships really matter, because trust building is key to these. You want to have fruitful meetings where people can actually bring their concerns up at the table and not at the coffee stand, so to speak. Really, trust building is something that I would encourage anybody to focus in on. So if you're getting into a collaboration, start with some of the partners that you've worked with for a long period of time, and so the relationship, it's strong. For me, being somewhat of an anxious fellow to get everything done. This is the killer. These things take a lot of time, and we need to, trust is built at the, or what's that saying, speed of time, or I just screwed that one up, but you know where I'm getting at. You need to take the time either to build trust, to deal with aversions to risk. This whole exercise has been in getting the community to assume a greater amount of risk, mitigated risk, to take on the community information exchange. And the third piece is experience. It's shocking the level of experience that's hidden away in nuggets of agencies around our community that we could leverage to build these various components. Sam's team's messages are full of questions from me. What does this mean? What's an API? Help me understand technology, right? And I have Sam now to provide these answers to these questions, but a number of other folks in community are helping me with governance, with other aspects of the work. So really looking for finding out that talent that exists already and bringing those folks to the table is another a really significant piece from what we've learned. So with that, we hope you gave you a little bit of an insight into this collaboration. I want to thank Sam for taking the time to partake in this, and we can open it up to questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, guys. There's only been one question so far. I don't know if you can see it or not. It says, what technology software did you consider? You could answer generally. What technology is out there to consider?
Awesome. Okay, so we went down a very interesting pathway. We looked at customization of a CRM. So this would be your Salesforce or your Dynamics as platforms that way. And then we looked to see if there was a software as a solution. So something out of the box that we could get started on quickly. So we considered those two applications, and we learned that there is a significant cost to customization, and learned about that, and licensing made it a bit cost prohibitive for where we were at. So we ultimately went with out of box solution. This was to enable a pilot to make sure we had all the moving pieces and move forward from there. And that this technology, this software platform was compliant in the Canadian context was really important to us as well.
Yeah, I'd like to also just add in there as well. One of the things was around that it wasn't just a straightforward, this type of platform will integrate with this type of platform. We really wanted to look at the methodology of how these programs allow data to connect from one platform, with the basis that, we knew some of the stakeholders at the table were there and what software they had, but that's an ever expanding group. And so we didn't want to be too pigeonholed into offerings. And so as Richard mentioned, we had these very expensive custom builds. We also had these direct software packages that would have really forced us to lean heavily into professional services to build those data integrations. And some professional services to validate the builds is a good idea, but if you're constantly relying on that external vendor to integrate new platforms and all that, the cost can quickly balloon out of control.
Awesome. CRL. What's a CRL? Someone is asking.
I believe that's CRM.
CRM, Customer Relationship Management.
Thank you. Yes, so those.
I know CRM.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, I may have mumbled or got the acronym wrong, but yeah, CRM, that would be like your Salesforce and your Dynamics.
Cool. And there's no other questions yet. So you did a very good job explaining everything. Give a few more questions, make sure no one else has, or a few more seconds, make sure no one else has more questions. Since there is that little delay between you asking the question and them hearing the question. Yep, CRM. Yep.
I think just a bit more that there's a lot of learnings in purchasing software that we're hoping to publish after this. There's a lot of things to really consider, full well knowing that you're going to get something wrong, not all right, but we'll hopefully be publishing a really in-depth what to consider when looking at vendors for software.
Sounds very complicated. All right, well, it doesn't look like there's any other questions. So I guess we get to let people go early today, which is awesome. It's been a long day of sitting and listening, and I'm sure people want to get moving again. So thank you both for speaking to us today and sharing all of that with us. And everyone else who's been watching, I hope you enjoyed the day. And we will see you back here tomorrow at 11 a.m. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.